Hi Chris, thank you for doing this. Just a couple of questions that I want to ask you. Talking about materials that you use in the class, and could you tell me what materials you find have most success in your classes, that work in the class?
Yeah, the things I find that have most success are the things that they build up gradually and lead towards some kind of whole class activity, competitive usually activity, sort of climax. For example, if you're doing modal verbs, I would what I normally do is I would sort of model the vocabulary nice and quickly, model the language nice and quickly, so it's all on the board. Then get them doing something like either designing a company or designing a country, where they come up with a set of rules.
Right.
Then sitting around the outside of the room, they would all visit each other's countries, listen to the description of the rules, and based on that decide where they want to live. So there's like a competitive element on the board. The country with the most names under it at the end is the winner, for example.
So would you need a course book to do that?
Nah, not at all. You would need a pen basically. When I do it, I make some handouts myself just to give them an idea. I design my own country called like Chrisland or something stupid, and then to get them, because obviously you don't want to stop stuff. The only good thing about really giving people any kind of handout at all is that I think it lets them be more creative, because if you just say design a country with your rules, they'll just come up with stuff like you shouldn't kill and stuff like this. But if you design something a bit silly where you're like everyone must watch every Premier League game or something, then they're more inclined to come up with more creative stuff if you've done it first.
So you guide them by introducing it. The introduction to the activity is really important then, isn't it?
I mean you sort of, but equally you don't need to do so much. I mean you would get it all on the board as quickly as possible, because obviously that bit's always a bit of a dry bit of the lesson when you're stood at the front doing board work. So get that up as quickly as possible, and then get them looking at your example, and then your example will guide them, and then you can just monitor. And basically within about 5 minutes it's over to them, and then you've got a really like 30-40 minutes of student-centred discussion.
Excellent. And you just basically monitor it and go around?
Yeah, well, you give them like 3 minutes. So say you were doing it with 12 students, you'd have groups of 3.
Yeah.
So then one group's in the middle, you've got one chair there for that group, one chair there for that group, one chair there for that group. You go, right, you've got 3 minutes to sell your country to this student, then they move around. And I think it's a good way of doing something like that is a good way of doing enough repetition without it getting boring.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because after the first time and the first names go up on the board, they realise, like we didn't get anyone or whatever. So then they're really trying to do it, and but they're not thinking it's a modal verb. You know, they're trying to like get their thing across, which I think is one of this kind of. I don't know what you'd call it really, but this idea of circulating everyone through this process is the best way of keeping repetition fresh, in my experience.
So it's not language. It is language based, but you're actually using it communicatively to actually use it.
Yeah, I mean, that being the idea that they end up using the same modal verb 15 times over,
but don't realise
they're doing it, and also really stress. You know, at the start they might be like, you don't have to do this, and then as it goes on they'll be like, you don't have, you know, they start getting the emphasis naturally, and sort of like, I find, the reality of the language comes out more over time.
So that kind of answers my second question about, do you teach grammar explicitly or do you allow students to find out for themselves? I think you just basically answered that question, because you kind of do it through activities, don't you?
Yeah, so, I mean, I always want something at the front they can look at basically, but I just get that up there as soon as possible, and then even if they don't realise the connection immediately between what they're doing and what's up there, because you see, that's one of the things you can see in students that I know there's a lot of techniques and stuff and a lot of ways of getting away from that traditional teaching, but I think you just see how much students glance at the board and then use it. I think you'll never really get away from having everything big, bright and colourful at the front of the class.
So it's like an earth, it's like a ground for them. They go back to it. It's important for them. Then they can go off and be creative, but they need that.
They know they can always turn around and
go back to base if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. And you set your class up accordingly. You've got the people in the middle, you've got the people around the outside. People in the middle are listening, they're not looking at the board. People on the outside just need to glance over, and then they can communicate better.
Activities which are the least successful?
The things which I don't want to use the word reality, because obviously like that last thing I described doesn't have massive context of reality, but like sort of relevance in some way to some kind of ends. You know, like a massive. Like some course specs do it real well. Some of them have a load of vocabulary around one subject structured in a quite a good way, but other times you just see a big load of sort of words related to money or something, and you
but
think
irrelevant to what's actually going on, or just too much.
Irrelevant as a big lump of vocab, like it's not gonna. Every item of language needs a context to be repeated in class, really, and then to be seen outside. And I think, you see a lot of stuff which just loses students, really.
Brilliant.
Sorry.
That's all right. That's
okay. Just a couple more questions. Do you use technology in the classroom?
Yeah, not as much as I should, really. I know you can just, because we've got an IWB, just having Google open adds so much to your lesson, you know, like image sort of searching in the class, and it also allows for because of the net, in the same way that I think your lessons often go off on tangents that you don't plan, having big screen internet available kind of also lets that happen in quite a...
Because you can look things up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can go on a tangent that you might not have prepared for, and you end up being able to back it up and view. And obviously, the visual thing is massive.
Do you use video in the class?
Yeah.
Well, do you think that's a good thing? Do you think what are the advantages of using video?
It's brilliant at initial attention grabbing. If you just show a video with no context. No context as in you haven't explained what the video is or why you're watching it. You can give that immediate situation to the class that the students will then understand later and try. And also it's so much about the confidence of the students in the group, and it's like I mentioned before with the first activity. If you give them an example of yourself being a bit silly with something, they will have the confidence. And likewise, if they see say you were teaching difficult situations at work, if you showed like faulty towers or something from the office or something, they lose some inhibitions about it, and they're more willing to practice, and then more stuff. You can be more task-based because stuff's coming out much more automatically.
Brilliant. Okay.